Hi there, and welcome to the Ambition podcast. I'm Ellen Buchan, Communications and Insights Assistant for AMBA. Last month, I caught up with Will Dawes, our Research and Insights Manager. AMBA has just released some new research asking business school leaders in the AMBA network about the opportunities and challenges surrounding their business schools, and also their perceptions of their schools compared to the market. I was keen to catch up with Will about why AMBA felt this research was important and what he thought the key takeaways were. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your career?
Hi Ellen, hi everyone. So I'm a social researcher by trade. I've got around 12 years experience working for a range of clients and individuals in the public sector and in the private sector. So I've had big assignments for the Home Office, for the Ministry of Justice, for the Department of Education, some big kind of government departments, but also charities, organisations like the British Council. I've also done a little bit of work for Shell in the past. And then a couple of years ago, I joined AMBA and BGA, which was a really exciting opportunity for me. And that was with the role and remit of understanding a bit more about what's going on in the higher education business school arena, but also what that means for the schools and for the sector itself, and trying to kind of communicate that to schools and to the sector, and really helping AMBA and BGA build up a wider database and knowledge of what schools are doing, how they're operating, what struggles they're having, what challenges they're facing, what opportunities they have. Also a bit about the students themselves and how they're finding things. And then just finally linking that into what's going on in the overall business space, what's happening in the commercial world.
Nice. AMBA and BGA have just recently released 2 reports having surveyed business school leaders that are further on the way. Can you tell us a little about the methodology and the thought behind these reports?
Yeah, well, I guess from a methodology point of view, they're pretty straightforward, really. It's an online survey of AMBA and BGA's most senior business school leader contacts and stakeholders. So basically people who are decision makers at business schools, who assign budgets, who plan strategies around MBA programs, and who lead the business school themselves. And really what we wanted to do with the study was to understand a bit about what are the kind of strategies and motivations of business schools at this time. You know, we know a lot about how they've operated in the past and traditional methods, but we're very aware that we're really reaching a pivot in terms of how business is operating, in terms of digitalization, technology, how students work and what their expectations are. And so we really wanted to find out a bit about how the schools themselves are adapting to these challenges and needs, and what ideas they've got in place and the ways in which they're executing them. And to also look a bit about the comparison between schools and to find out, you know, which schools are sort of thriving in these areas and which schools maybe are looking for a bit more sort of support and taking their kind of their first steps into this new world.
And can you explain how you split up these 3 surveys?
Yeah, so we conducted one survey towards the back end of last year. What we really wanted to do is provide a kind of clear narrative for each of the reports that we produced. The surveys asked a real range of different things, and it was a long survey. It took 25 minutes for these leaders to complete, and we really appreciate the time that they took to fill in the survey. I recognise that these surveys they're not necessarily easy to respond to, because some of the information is about their kind of top of mind perceptions, but some of it's about what their school's actually doing, some kind of hard numbers and figures and percentages. So we split the survey up into 3 to kind of give the reader and audiences a kind of clearer idea of themes around them. So the first one was really looking at technology and how schools are embracing technology. The second report looks at what schools are doing strategically from an external point of view. So how they're forming relationships with other schools, how they're working with their affiliated university, if they have one, whether they're kind of forming corporate alliances, and also what their perceptions are of other business schools as well as their own. And then finally, the third report, titled The Business of Business Schools, is looking at, what are the kind of operational remits within which the business schools are operating, and how they're actually utilizing different learning methods, teaching methods, capacity building, how they're managing their advertising budgets, how they're managing their finances and revenue. So really looking at the kind of the cogs of the business school and how leaders perceive the success of that at the moment.
And so out of these three reports, what findings really stood out to you?
Well, it was a really interesting set of data. Some of it a little bit surprising, but actually there's a lot of kind of really reassuring data around the high perceptions and the high regard with which business schools see themselves. Something that stood out, I guess, is that about 3/4, so 76% of leaders think that the fundamentals of the MBA will change in the next 10 years. And when you think about it, that's an awful lot of leaders believing that the kind of core elements of the MBA will change in the next decade. Core elements. When you think about the MBA, something which has got a long tradition, which has got core principles and ideas and theories that underpin them, and despite the kind of ongoing research and development and ideas and industry specialization which goes into keeping them fresh and up to date, 3/4 saying that the fundamentals will change in the next 10 years really is, to me, quite significant. But what does that mean in practice? Well, I guess here we're looking at the input of a range of new technologies, which I guess will assist business schools in helping them to ensure their programs are up to date, so that they're really relevant, so that business schools can operate in a flexible way, so that they can make sure their programs align to their students' needs and learning preferences. And thirdly, so that they can work in a way in which enables the business school itself to run as efficiently as possible, so that technology can be utilized for the benefit of the school itself. And we know that schools believe in things like AI and automation and believe that these are terribly important going forward. I guess the kind of the flip side to this is schools see that there's mixed levels of confidence about how well they've implemented them currently. So perhaps that underpins a certain sense of impending change, or they realise that things are going to evolve and change significantly in the next decade, and but they're not quite sure how that will kind of look or take shape. So I think that's the kind of core finding that really stood out for me and kind of cut across each of the three reports.
That's really interesting. How confident are business school leaders in the future of business schools?
Well, despite any anxiety, I guess, about the implementation of technology and the challenges they face around addressing the needs of students in the next decade, schools are actually very confident about their futures. We know that from the study, 84% think that their school's going to grow capacity in the next 3 years, and significant proportions report that they will actually open an overseas campus and build on their existing offering. So that's, to me, that's a significant proportion of leaders who believe that, and given the uncertain economic and geopolitical world in which they're operating, given the challenges that they had to overcome a decade ago with the financial crisis and how they kind of pulled through that period of time, actually that self-belief is pretty reassuring, I think, for the future of schools and their overall levels of confidence.
So if business schools are confident about their own business school, how do they see themselves in comparison to other business schools and their competitors in the market?
What's really interesting is that the leaders report that they have a sort of mutual respect for their competitors. I think essentially in industries and areas I've worked with and heard about in the past, there's a great deal of there can be a great deal of a sort of antagonistic mentality, or they put down their competitors, or they view their competitors negatively and believe that they're the only way forward and the only sort of institution and company that can deliver great success for their customers and deliver what their customers want. But actually in the management education sector, there's a real collegiate mentality, and business schools rate both themselves as an institution, but actually the business schools for which they compete with very highly indeed. So they see the value of both their school and what they do, especially in terms of sort of core activities such as teaching and learning. But they also rate their competitors very highly as well. I think around 8 to 9 in 10 business schools think both they and their competitors do an excellent job in the areas in which they work. So there's a lot of mutual respect. There's a very collegiate mentality and a willingness to collaborate, and that kind of comes across strongly in the results. So when you think about the market itself, it's telling you there's a sense that the market is positive and good and produces a high quality of teaching and learning opportunities, works well. But it also tells you, I guess, that there's a great deal of competition, and from a student point of view, there are a great many opportunities out there to study at really top quality institutions.
We spoke a bit about technology earlier on, but how exactly are business schools innovating their programs to keep up with digitalisation and Education 4.0?
Well, flexible learning and digital learning is certainly an area in which schools have focused their attentions ever more greatly in recent years. We know from our application and enrolment trends that online learning and blended learning has increased in the past few years. And this is something that this survey also demonstrates. When we asked about areas in which schools have innovated in the past year, the most common responses were around digitalisation, flexible learning and adaptation. And perhaps today, we're today sitting here, most of the country in isolation with COVID-19 and the necessity to work in a remote environment is perhaps an opportunity to develop the flexible and digital working and teaching methods even more so, and at a time when it's never been important to do so because it's essential. So perhaps actually, around this time this year in 2020 will be a pivot point when it comes to schools trusting in the flexible working methods which they've employed in the past, and the online development of courses. Because I think a sense from the survey, which was conducted towards the end of last year, was that schools are doing a decent amount in terms of technological development and embracing digitalization, but they're not going completely full on with it. They're holding something back, but they do recognise that they're holding something back. And I think that's to do slightly with an element of paranoia about, if we're to do something and it doesn't work, are other schools going to not do it and actually be more beneficial from not doing it? Are they going to make mistakes in the process? Is there an element of trial and error, I guess? So this I think does provide an opportunity to really crystallise learning, teaching, program delivery methods which are online, digital, and delivered in a flexible way. And schools recognise this, So we asked about flipped learning, which is where which isn't directly to do with sort of digitalisation, but that has elements of it. but where, you know, a lot of learning takes place in concentrated areas and happens in reverse. So through practice, through experiment, through actually inputting the methods that they want to deliver before they're actually taught about them, or taught about them in a kind of side-by-side way. And we're getting the sense that schools really want to do this, but they're not doing it potentially to the extent to which they wish to. Also, with areas like AI and digitalization and big data, there's a great sense of schools recognizing the importance of these things and these areas of learning, and delivery and teaching and topics on those types of technology, but they're not doing as much as they potentially realise they will have to do in the future.
So following on from that, are business schools producing MBA students who meet the needs of today's tech employers?
Yeah, largely they are. I think around, we asked a question directly about this actually, and around two-thirds of leaders believe that their programs are meeting the needs of the top tech companies like Google, Apple, Amazon, Tesla. But two-thirds saying that they're kind of confident they're doing it isn't really where schools want to be. I guess they really want to believe that they are delivering the graduates who can go into those companies and those types of companies and deliver, because that's where, it feels like the future growth of the economy is really coming from, and they're becoming ever more relevant. So yes, they are, but maybe not as far as they'd want to. And this might, to some extent, be due to lower levels of specialisation available on MBAs. Sometimes there's a more general nature, so maybe leaders themselves look at their own curriculum and recognise they might not be producing the graduates who can go into their roles, but also maybe having more industry staff would help with this. I mean, we know that there are sort of a significant minority of teachers who do have in-industry experience, but potentially, especially in the area of technology, which is fast-paced, fast-moving, and ever-changing, having more industry-embedded staff would actually help with that process. But there could also be an element of paranoia from schools as well. This is the leaders thinking this. It's not necessarily the students and the employers who have that slightly lower level of perception than you would perhaps look for. So
do you think a bigger focus on technology will be something that is a theme for the future of business schools?
I think it's something they're going to have to continually work on and pay attention to. I think I'm someone who believes that we've had technology revolutions before, and in a sense, the technology revolution has been going on for, when you look at IT specifically, it's been going on for the past couple of decades. The issue with technology, though, is that it is ever changing, and when you sell a can of Coca-Cola, I guess there are that does evolve and that does change, but selling software and selling IT specialisms changes in a much more kind of abstract and a much more kind of systematic way than selling real physical products. So, this cloud age that we're living in and the technology age we're living in really is something that schools are going to have to continue to focus on, learn and adapt with. And I don't think it's a case of thinking, we've got to get ourselves up to speed and that's it. I think it's schools having a mindset and a process by which they're fully able to engage with technological developments and the needs of students and industry on an ongoing basis. So having the systems in place to be aware of that and to do that and to adapt and to tweak content delivery, their own systems for their own benefit is something they will have to do to thrive.
So moving on to more of an external view of business schools, what kind of partnerships do business schools have, and how successful do business school leaders see this being?
Well, leaders cited a range of partnerships with corporate organisations. These often actually centred around things like research funding, so funding for specific research projects, broader sponsorship, so sponsoring a kind of an area or institute, or partnership with an area or institute, or other kind of such commercial tie-ins. And actually schools largely believe that these are successful. They think they're a good thing. They think they're getting benefits out of it. My take on the findings, actually, when schools spoke about and leaders spoke about these corporate partnerships, it feels that more could potentially be done around teaching and learning partnerships and direct engagement with the student. A lot of the partnerships seem to be very institutionally based and macro based, rather than about specific delivery and specific ways in which the companies and the institutions, the business school institutions, can mutually benefit each other. And it feels like that more can be done around that area, in that sense of sort of mutual growth. So sharing of research, sharing of data, sharing of kind of corporate expertise and information which can kind of feed into the research process. So actually, from a more operational point of view, potentially more can be done.
And what about the relationship that business schools have with each other? Have you seen a rise in business school alliances? And what can you tell us about these alliances?
Around 2/3 of schools currently have alliances with other business schools. So that's a good proportion. And it wouldn't be for me to say whether there's an optimal amount of schools which actually should have alliances together. It's not for me to say that schools couldn't operate perfectly independently on their own. I'm sure many could and would. But what we do know is that leaders do respect and value partnerships that they're able to form with other colleagues and institutions, especially in terms of how they can share resources and share expertise and help each other, not necessarily in ways in which they are looking to grow in the same area, but collaborate in terms of having utilizing their own intellectual property, their own knowledge base, and sharing that so that the other school can develop their knowledge and IT and intellectual property base in different areas. So from a previous survey we did actually around poverty and income growth and low income and low income individuals, and looking at how schools actually help those kind of communities that are in poverty, one thing that came across strongly was this idea that actually collaboration between schools is something which would enable them to do a better job. So when you're looking at big macro issues like resolving world poverty, like helping with the growth of incomes and GDP per capita, these are things that schools can't solve on their own. They need to utilize the ideas and intellect and capacity of other institutions and companies, and of course other business schools, so that if they're working in an area that's very specific and niche, say around farming or supply chains, or around training business leaders, or around specifically lifting communities out of poverty, they can share specific expertise and ensure that that those expertise work together and joined up can be really successful. Another challenge that schools face on an individual level is in the communication of findings to industry, so that those findings are taken on board and utilised, but also to governments and to policy makers and to big institutions like the World Economic Forum, UN, the EU. And by having collaborative partnerships, by sharing ideas, by sharing ways of working, by having themes and projects, I think they're in a better place to actually make an impact and to do more. So I think the fact that 2/3 of schools already have alliances is a good thing. It's not to say schools can't be successful on their own without alliances, but from what leaders are feeding back themselves, I get the sense that they are important.
So we talked about technology being like a theme for the future in business schools. What do you think other themes of the future are?
Yeah, well, it's hard to look away from technology. I think that is a really important area, because it does cut across so many different themes, like running schools efficiently, profitability, ensuring ensuring programs are relevant for industry. I guess a couple of things. I think it's just generally specialisation is something comes up. I think students want to specialise more. I think general management is something which comes into play more and more with the more senior echelons of big companies. But actually, to get there, and even at MBA level, individuals need to and want to have MBA specific skills to their area of work, be that the health sector, oil and gas, consultancy, finance, marketing, HR. They want to have that, but they also want to marry that with the sort of general sort of learnings and skills and opportunities an MBA offers. So I think striking that balance will be a challenge in terms of meeting students' needs. And then also the move to flexible working. We know that MBAs are time intensive. They're a big investment for individuals. People are ever more squeezed in terms of living costs, in terms of income growth. So these are pressures which impact on students and therefore impact on business schools themselves. So I think the business schools which would do best for students in terms of their opportunities to and willingness to take on an MBA and other business programs are those which are prepared to be really flexible and think dynamically about how students can learn within their own home and work environment, as well as the sort of full-time option itself. I think an issue which comes up a lot for employers when I've engaged with them in the past, and came through a little bit in this survey as well, is the need to create really real all-round leaders who don't just have great technical know-how, great business acumen, but also have the ability to communicate, to engage, to empathize, to take technical issues and produce them at a practical level, to have the diligence and the mental aptitude and the mental and the emotional intelligence to engage with their clients and those that they manage, so that the ideas can be communicated in an appropriate way. They're not just following a rule book or a way of doing things, that they have the ability to adapt and be nimble in their own personalities in a way in which they engage with people and their staff. I think that's really important. I think that's something schools are going to have to get their heads around in terms of how they select students, but also how they bring students on in those areas. And it's possibly something which isn't measured so much at a kind of business school at a business school level at the moment, but that might be something which employers really value. And if there's a sense of added value in that area, if you can take a leader who's potentially really good technically, has great proficiencies and a fantastic mind, and can turn them into someone who is dynamic, who can work up and down in terms of the levels within the organisation, has greater confidence, is able to recognise when they have when they're under pressure, when they can't manage things, when they need to bring others in, to communicate and engage with people to bring them on board. That I think is the sort of thing which employers really value, and something which I think business schools should recognise as a focus for the future. So we're not just talking about technology here and digital heads and really, really bright people. We're talking to people who can operate on a human level. But there's lots that schools do exceedingly well, and I really wouldn't want to go overkill on areas that they need to focus on in the future, because there's a lot that they do to a very high standard, and we know this because students tell us. So, last year we did a huge student survey which asked them about how well they rated their business school they attended, how satisfied they were with what they got out of it, whether they thought it was good value for money, whether they thought they got the skills they needed to take their careers to the next level. And, overwhelmingly, they did think the school offered them great value for money, that it was a great investment, that they would get great monetary return on going to a business school, but also great skills return and fantastic opportunities in terms of networking and meeting people who they can collaborate with in the future, who they can really bring their careers on with. So when we talk about tech being a challenge and something that schools are going to have to face up to, the idea of more emotionally intelligent leaders and better practical leaders, the overwhelming majority of students believe that the schools are delivering what they want and need, and I think schools should recognise that and be proud of the work they do.
Am I right in saying that what we've talked about today is the results from Report 1 and Report 2? What can we look forward to in the third report?
So the third report is going to look at the business of business schools. So what do I mean by the business of business schools? So I'm talking about the operational issues which are pertinent to the schools themselves and help them function and be successful and be profitable and deliver what they need to do for their customers, for the students themselves. So it'll look at financials, it'll look at how profitable they've been, where they've derived their incomes from, where they're trying to harness demands and what impacts on demand for their programs, what they're spending on advertising and in other areas to bring students on board, perceptions on how their business school is actually running and the quality of their school, and other ways in which they've innovated, really. So it's really an all-round look at the internal functions of the school and what the leaders' perceptions are of that, and also what they know about the kind of operational capacity that it has.
And how can we access these reports?
So we're really keen for as many people as possible to see these reports. So we're going to email them out to all the business school community within AMBA and BGA, so the business school leaders themselves, other wider stakeholders, students and graduates, and we're going to put the reports on our website. We're also going to sort of release it to the media, so we're really hoping that media pick up on these really interesting, innovative findings, these thought-leading ideas and perceptions going forward, so that they have a good idea of what the main drivers are within the industry, and so business understands what's going on within business schools, but also the business school students and the business school operators themselves. I think it's a real opportunity to learn, what is happening in this area, what the most senior, most important and crucial decision makers are doing, and how they're operating and how they see the future. It's a really positive report, or the series is a really positive set of reports. So though challenges are identified, I think there's an overwhelming sense that schools are well prepared and well geared going forwards into the next decade.
Thank you again, Will, for being on the podcast. As you said, all of our research, including the Business School Leaders reports, can be found at www.associationofmbas.com/research. Thank you for listening, and make sure you listen to the next Ambition podcast.